Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. In the luxurious penthouse overlooking the glittering city of New York, Alexander Whitman, an arrogant millionaire famous for his immense wealth and complete lack of empathy, held a glass of scotch in his hand. His gaze rested on the man before him, a healer known for his unorthodox but miraculous methods. "So you claim you can cure anyone?" Alexander retorted mockingly, a sarcastic smile stretching his lips. "I'll give you $1 million if you manage to cure me, but know that I don't believe your miracle stories for a second." The man, calm and composed, betrayed no emotion. His deep, dark eyes seemed to read beyond the gilded walls and material splendor. He did not answer immediately, letting the silence hang heavy in the room. Alexander burst out laughing, a dry, cruel laugh. "Go on, show me what you can do. But don't get your hopes up, I'm incurable." He leaned against the marble fireplace, confident, sure of himself, sure that this challenge was ridiculous. Yet, in that precise moment, something subtly shifted in the air. An invisible, almost imperceptible energy seemed to swirl around the healer. And as Alexander raised his glass to toast his arrogance, no one knew that this encounter would change his life forever. The miracle was about to begin. The next morning, Alexander Whitman woke up feeling slightly unwell. Nothing dramatic, just an unusual fatigue that gripped his body and mind. He shook his head in disbelief. It must be a bout of fatigue. "I don't need to be cured," he thought, ignoring the premonition that was creeping in his stomach. The healer, named Elijah Carter, was waiting for him in the penthouse living room, sitting calmly in a leather armchair. His hands were clasped, and his gaze was fixed on Alexander, as if he could penetrate his most secret thoughts. "Sit down, Alexander," Elijah said gently. "Healing doesn't happen in an instant. It requires trust and openness." The millionaire sneered, crossing his arms. "Trust? You want me to trust a stranger? I gave you $1 million for a miracle, not for a psychology lesson." Elijah didn't smile, but he held out his hand. "So we'll start differently. Close your eyes and breathe deeply. Focus on your body, not your money." Alexander reluctantly complied, cynicism still present in his eyes. But as he breathed, he felt a strange warmth spreading through his aching muscles, as if every fiber of his body was slowly awakening to life. At first, he tried to ignore it. "That's impossible, I'm too rational for that," he told himself. But a pain he had carried for years, tension in his back and chronic fatigue in his legs, began to lessen. Subtly at first, then more and more noticeably. Alexander sat bolt upright, stunned. His eyes widened. What have you done?" he stammered. Elijah remained silent, simply staring at him. For the first time, the millionaire realized that what he had taken for a joke was about to become much more than that. An unexpected miracle was beginning to happen, and nothing would ever be the same again. In the days that followed, Alexander Whitman began to notice changes that far exceeded anything he could have imagined. The persistent pain in his back had almost completely disappeared, and his energy seemed inexhaustible. Even his mood, always acrimonious and impatient, slowly transformed. He no longer had that constant irritation that always seemed to follow him. Yet his ego refused to admit the truth. Every morning, he looked at himself in the mirror and repeated to himself, "It's impossible, it's just in my head." But the reality of his recovery was undeniable. Even his doctors, consulted discreetly, were amazed by the rapid and inexplicable improvement in his health. Elijah Carter continued his visits calmly and without haste. He never spoke of wealth or recognition. He guided Alexander through simple exercises in breathing, meditation, and self-awareness. One morning, as the sun rose over Manhattan, Alexander found himself smiling genuinely as he descended the stairs of his penthouse. He realized he hadn't felt such lightness in years. The cynical millionaire who mocked the world felt strangely alive. Yet, the transformation wasn't limited to the physical. Alexander began to reflect on his past choices, his excesses, his arrogance toward those he considered inferior. The inner change was harder to accept than the physical healing. His pride drove him to reject this evolution, but every attempt at resistance seemed to crumble in the face of Elijah's quiet strength. One evening, Alexander overheard a conversation between himself and Elijah. "You're changing me, and I hate it." Elijah replied gently, "It is not I who change you. You heal yourself. I only accompany you." At that precise moment, Alexander understood that the true miracle was not merely the disappearance of his physical pain. The miracle lay in the revelation that the man he had always believed himself to be, cynical, arrogant, untouchable, could finally be reborn in a new light. But even in this newfound clarity, one question remained: would he be able to fully accept this change and free himself from his proud past, before everything he knew collapsed around him? A few weeks later, Alexander Whitman was unrecognizable from the man he had been before meeting Elijah. His physical health was perfect, his chronic fatigue had vanished, and every morning he woke up with an energy he hadn't felt in decades. But it wasn't just his body that had changed, his mind and heart had begun to open to feelings he had long ignored. One afternoon, while strolling through Central Park, Alexander noticed a young boy sitting alone on a bench, shivering with cold. His first instinct, that of an arrogant and cynical millionaire, would have been to ignore the scene. But something inside him had changed. Without thinking, he approached and offered the boy his own jacket, a simple gesture he never would have imagined making before. The boy looked at him in astonishment, then a smile lit up his face. At that precise moment, Alexander felt an unfamiliar warmth in his chest, a mixture of wonder and satisfaction that surpassed any material wealth he had ever possessed. Back in his penthouse, Elijah watched the story with a slight smile. "You're beginning to understand, Alexander," he said softly. "True wealth isn't in money, but in the capacity to change, to heal, to love." But the miracle didn't end there. One night, while Alexander slept, he had a strange and beautiful dream. In this dream, all the pain and wounds he had accumulated, physical, emotional, and spiritual, dissolved, replaced by a brilliant light. When he awoke, he felt a mental clarity and serenity he had never known. His decisions would never again be dictated by pride or fear. The millionaire who had mocked Elijah's healing power was now confronted with an irreversible truth: his life had just changed forever, and nothing and no one could ever go back. For the first time, Alexander thought about the future with humility and gratitude. He knew that the real miracle wasn't the money he had promised Elijah, but the profound change that had transformed his life. However, a feeling of unease persisted. Even though his body and mind were healed, Alexander felt that something even greater was brewing, an event that would test the depth of his transformation and his ability to fully embrace this new path. A few days later, Alexander Whitman received an unexpected call. A local foundation for sick children invited him to visit one of their centers. Normally, he would have rejected the invitation, deeming it too insignificant or pointless. But something inside him had changed, he accepted immediately. Upon entering the center, Alexander was struck by the children's fragility and suffering. Some lay on hospital beds, others tried to smile despite their pain. His heart, once closed to all empathy, clenched. He felt an intense, almost physical emotion, unlike anything he had ever experienced before. As he approached a young boy with sad eyes, Alexander felt a familiar breath, the soothing presence of Elijah, who had accompanied him through every step of his transformation. The healer placed his hand on Alexander's shoulder and whispered, "You have done more than heal your body, Alexander. You have healed your heart. And now you can change the lives of others." At that precise moment, Alexander understood the true meaning of the miracle. It wasn't just his healing, nor even the feeling of renewed energy or inner peace. The miracle was the ability he now had to spread kindness, hope, and transformation around him. With an emotion he had never felt before, Alexander decided to create a foundation to help sick children, use his wealth for the common good, and inspire those who, like him, had believed that everything was impossible. Elijah watched in silence, satisfied. The arrogant, mocking millionaire was gone. In his place stood a humble, generous, and profoundly alive man. Alexander knelt beside the young boy and held out his hand. "You are never alone," he said gently. There will always be someone to support you." The boy smiled, and at that smile, Alexander felt a flash of light in his heart. The miracle was complete. Not in money or power, but in the total healing of his body, mind, and soul. And as the sun set over Manhattan, one thing was clear: Alexander Whitman's life would never be the same again. He had been mocked, challenged, and transformed, and the true miracle had changed the world, around him and within him.